You should make sure that you've got your book, a good place to sit, and ready to listen as we read along. Please pause unless you have all of those things ready to go. Because today we start on page 42. Chapter 4, The Riddle. Mike loved riddles the way Nora loved Scrabble. If he was supposed to remember something he'd learned last week, forget it. That's why his report card was always so bad. But a riddle is different. Everything you needed to know was right in front of you. You just had to look at it another way. If the question was, what can you catch but never throw? You needed to see the other meaning of catch. The answer was nothing to do with the ball. The answer was a fever. Mike loved how the answer to a riddle could be unexpected but totally obvious at the same time. I'm ready, he told Mr. Zerlin. Bring it on, said Nora. She probably did brain teasers every morning for breakfast. Mike hoped she didn't make him look slow. All right, then, the magician said. He took a stack of paper from under the counter and handed Mike and Nora each one sheet, along with a pair of scissors. Can you cut a hole in this paper big enough to walk through? Uh-oh, thought Mike. That's not a riddle, Mike said. It's a challenge, said Mr. Zerlin, and it's fine if you work together. Anyone knew there was no way you could step through a hole in the piece of paper. Even the tiny margins all around, the hole would be no bigger than, say, both of Mike's hands spread wide. Maybe a baby could step through that hole, but nobody else. Mike sighed. He looked at Nora blankly. He didn't really want this challenge. He just wanted to learn a magic trick before he left the store. He cut the paper and ended up with a hole about the size of an index card. No good. Nora was quiet. She wasn't having any luck either. Mr. Zerlin was watching Mike. You can do it. Mike rolled his eyes again. Mr. Zerlin was a total stranger. He had no idea what Mike could do. He glanced in the direction of the coffee shop, half wishing his mom would walk across the street. He noticed the welcome mat again. The word believe glowed in the light from the shop window. Mike let out a long breath. Fine, he thought. I can do it. I believe. Whatever. Mr. Zerlin handed another piece of paper to Mike, folded it in half the long way. He didn't say anything, just handed it over like he was giving an important clue. Mike looked at the folded paper for a while. It was hopeless. Then for some reason he said, snowflakes. Nora looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Not the kind you see in winter, Mike explained. The kind you learn to cut in kindergarten. Mike folded the paper again and snipped. What if I make a snowflake with a lot of empty space inside? Then what if all the ribs of the snowflake can be cut and stretched out, sort of? Could that make a hole bigger than the original piece of paper? I don't know, said Nora. I don't really get it. Suddenly, Mike really did believe. This was the sort of test he could handle. And when Mike was doing riddles, he could tell when he was getting close to the answer. It was a sixth sense, like his mind was squinting to bring something into focus. Mike felt that way when he was cutting the paper. It was totally unlike him, but he got absolutely absorbed in the work. No fidgeting, no fooling around. He tried every snowflake pattern he could think of. Before he knew it, 10 minutes had passed and Mike was surrounded by broken snowflakes. He liked that feeling of trying hard, but he wasn't any closer to figuring out the answers. Sorry, he said, putting down the scissors. He was giving up the way he had given up on a million things before. So why was Mr. Zerlin looking at him like he'd done something right? I like the way you're thinking, said Mr. Zerlin, his dark eyes locked on Mike's. Reaching hard for the answer that's right in front of you. I've never seen a kid come so close to solving that riddle. Nobody said stuff like that to Mike. Ever. What about a zigzag? Suggested Mr. Zerlin. Mike wasn't sure what he meant, but he would try one more time, he figured. He folded another piece of paper lengthwise. He cut the edge in the shape of a lightning bolt, then opened it up hopefully. There was a hole there all right, but not one you could step through, unless you were twisted up, Mike thought. Doing yoga, maybe. With another sheet, he cut a straight line, almost at the top, from the fold to the near open edge. He stopped to think. Then below that, he made another cut in the opposite direction, stopping just before the fold. He moved the entire piece of paper, cutting until it was covered with what looked like stripes. Then he unfolded it carefully and cut down the middle, leaving only the very top and very bottom strips uncut. With a deep breath, Mike separated the paper with his fingers. It opened and opened until it was the size of a hula hoop. It really worked. He seriously couldn't believe he'd done it. "I knew it," said Merlin joyfully. Even Nora was impressed. "Awesome," she said. "How'd you do that?" Mike stepped into the circle and bowed. "Magic, of course." It really was a sort of magic to be the one who pulled that off. I'm going to have you come back to this to see if maybe you can do this on your own. So please turn to the next page. "But it's all about fancy cutting, right?" Nora said skeptically. Mike didn't want to get into it right now. "So, when do we learn the trick?" he asked Mr. Zerlin. He'd done what the magician had asked. How much longer would he have to wait? Mike wasn't famous for his patience. It was awkward, though. Mr. Zerlin looked at Mike, and Mike looked at Nora. She hadn't really solved the puzzle. Would she get to learn the trick too? Nora brushed bits of paper off her hoodie. "Mike, I'm going to see if your mom will get me a snack," she said. Mike watched her walk across the street, a bit confused. He had never won anything in his life, and now it felt like he'd won a lottery. He'd passed the test, and Nora hadn't? Kids like Nora got special privileges, glimpses of this secret grown-up world. But magicians had their own secret club too, and after Nora left, Mr. Zerlin let Mike take his first peek in. "Let's start with something basic. The floating cup trick," said Mr. Zerlin. Mr. Zerlin was a careful teacher, definitely better than Mike's last soccer coach. "That's it," he said. "No, more like this." He showed Mike, twisting his hand a bit. Within minutes, Mike was making a paper cup hover in midair. Mr. Zerlin showed him how to practice in a mirror so he could see what his audience would see. He promised that Mike would get over the weirdness of talking to himself. "It's the best way for a magician to rehearse," he said. He taught Mike to explain, for his audience, what he was about to do. "You tell them, but you don't tell them," Mr. Zerlin said. Somehow Mike knew just what he meant. A magician told a story, kind of, but not the whole story. Mike kept glancing across the street. His mom and Nora were in the window of the coffee shop with mugs of something hot. When his mom cleared the mugs off the table and got her papers in a bag, Mike knew it was time to go. He still had some questions, though. Not about the trick. He pretty much had that down. He just kept thinking about that magician at the birthday party. Was there more to this than Mr. Zerlin had showed him? He said thank you over and over again until he finally asked what he most wanted to know. "So, is magic really real?" The magician's eyes crinkled when he smiled. "Maybe, maybe not."